Okay, good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday night, so it's halacha and Tanya. Okay, we learned last time we were learning the laws of Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, and we were learning that you have to stand, you cannot motion, you cannot move, you obviously cannot talk, cannot do anything. And we're discussing that in the middle of Shemona Esrei, you don't answer anything, you just stop. If the chazan is saying the kedusha, you stop and listen, but you don't answer anything. Okay, so the next din over here in Shulchan Aruch is the dinim of the chazan's repetition. It's a very important laws, by the way. So let's explain first of all the reason of why the chazan does the repetition, and why by Ma'ariv and the night davening there's no repetition of the chazan. In the earlier days, they did not have any printed Siddurim. Many people were completely illiterate. They didn't know how to read. But there are people that didn't know how to daven. So therefore, the Chazan would repeat the Shemona Esrei for those people that did not know how to daven. They would listen word by word from the Chazan, and that would be considered as if they daven themselves. Ma'ariv, we learned last week, is optional, and therefore there's no repetition at Ma'ariv. But nevertheless, when the Chazan is repeating the Shemona Esrei, but you know what? Let me go back for a second before the repetition. There are many people have a custom, and this is Chabad custom, that at the end of Shemona Esrei, at the end of a Lokai Nitzor, right before the last, right before Osa Shalom, we say Yila Ratzin Imre Fi V'Hegin Liba L'Fanach Hashem Psuri V'Goyali. So our custom is before we say those words, we say a pasuk that the beginning of the pasuk is with the first letter of our name, and the pasuk ends with the last letter of our name. So, for instance, let's say we'll use a case with Chassidim. They would say the Rebbe's name, the Rebbe's psukim, and then we would say our own psukim. So let's say the Rebbe's name was Menachem Mendel. So Menachem begins with a mem and ends with a mem. So the custom is now already in the new Siddurim, you know, in the red Siddurim, they have many psukim for people's names. So if let's say your name is Avraham, it begins with an aleph and with a mem. You'll see over there a pasuk that begins with an aleph and ends with a mem. So let's say the Rebbe's pasuk begins with the Rebbe's name begins with a mem, ends with a mem. It's Ma'or Einayim Yisamach Leid Shmor Teva Tedashin Osam. It begins with a mem, ends with a mem. Then the Rebbe's second name Mendel begins with a mem, ends with a lamed. Tonight is Yud Beis Tammuz, so it's the Friedrich Rebbe's birthday, and the day he was released from prison. So let's say his name was Yosef Yitzchak. So Yosef begins with a Yud, ends with a Pei. Yitzchak and starts with a Yud, ends with a Kuf. So, I mean, I happen to know Sukkim because I have the same name, but you have Hashem Yidmar Ba'adi Chas Cholelam Hashem Al Teref. Okay, so that pasuk also begins with a Yud and ends with a Pei. The second name Yitzchak ends with a Yud and a Kuf. So the pasuk is Untilim Yitziem Mecheshach Samavus Meshaseim Inatik. Again, the pasuk begins with a Yud, ends with a Kuf. Why is there that originates? I believe in the Shalom. Now, what's the purpose of saying these psukim? It's a very interesting reason, a little bit esoteric. But when you come up after 120 years, how is the neshama going to remember the name for those psukim? That's what it says in the Shalom. You're going to say those psukim. That's why many people say the pasuk of their name, the first letter, the last letter. They'll say a pasuk that begins with the first letter, ends with the last letter, and so on. And there's in the Siddurim, many Siddurim have a whole lists So you see what your name begins with, what it ends with, and you find a pasuk that you could say. So it's a very important thing for people to say that pasuk, because again, it reminds the neshama after 120 years what the name of the neshama was. Okay, now when the chazan is repeating the Shemona Esrei, okay, so we said the reason for it. Now, if the chazan finishes the Shemona Esrei, okay, and then either he waits or he goes up and he doesn't move his feet, he does not have to go back 3 steps again for the repetition, because he just went back to 3 steps for the end and he went back up front, so he has it. If he moved away, so then he has to take another 3 steps before, back in front, before he starts the Shemona Esrei. Now, when a person is listening to the chazan repeating the Shemona Esrei, even if you're daven and you know the words and everything, it says in Shulchan Aruch you're really not allowed to do anything during the repetition. If you're behind the minyan, you're allowed to continue davening. But ideally, it says you're not allowed to learn. Ideally, you're supposed to follow the chazan's repetition inside. You're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to. Many people, in fact, they put on Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. They take it off in the middle. They take off the tefillin in the middle of Chazar Seshatz, and then they put on Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin in the middle of the repetition. It says in halacha they're not doing correctly. During the repetition of the Shemona Esrei, you're supposed to sit and listen to the repetition of the Shemona Esrei. Okay? Now, when the chazan, this is a very important din, especially for people that are running the shul to know this. In order for the chazan to repeat the Shemona Esrei, there's 2 prerequisite conditions. Number 1, there's a minyan, 10 people in the room. Number 2, there's 6 people that daven the Shemona Esrei together. Plus, when the chazan repeats the Shemona Esrei, there have to be, he's number 10, there have to be at least 9 people answering Amen on the repetition. If there's no 9 people answering the repetition, now Rebbe said, it's probable blessings in vain. We sing Hashem's name 18 times in vain, or 19 times in vain. So when you're chazing, the rabbi of the shul, the gabi, whoever it is, has to make sure, number 1, that there's a lot of people davening Shemona Esrei, because you must have at least 9 people that are not davening, because in the middle of Shemona Esrei you can't answer. So you need at least 9 people. So again, you need 6 people that daven together, plus you need 9 people besides the chazan, they're going to answer the Amidah, and then you're allowed to do the repetition. If those 2 conditions are met, the chazan cannot repeat the Shemona Esrei. So let's say, for argument's sake, all of a sudden you turn around, the chazan's about to start the Amidah, and there's only 9 people in the shul, you have a problem. There's a problem. The minyan 10 include, we said, it includes the chazan. Yes, it does. The chazan is one of the 10. Okay, next. The chazan also has to be careful. Number 1, if you're allowed to be talking, that means you finished davening already, you're supposed to say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei. When he says Baruch Atah Hashem, you say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei. The chazan finishes the bracha, you say Amen. The chazan is not supposed to begin the next bracha in the repetition until people finish answering Amen. So he has to stop. Baruch Atah Hashem, stop. People should say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei, and then the chazan finishes the bracha and he says Amen. Generally speaking, we'll learn more about that later. Any bracha that you are listening to fulfill your obligation, for instance, Kiddush, right? Somebody's making Kiddush for the community, or the head of the household is making Kiddush for the family. The din is you are not allowed to say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei. And if you did, according to Alter Rebbe, you are not Yotzer. That means if somebody, when listening to Kiddush, by mistake said when the guy was saying Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh Shabbos, and he said Baruch Atah Hashem, and the person said Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai, he did not fulfill the obligation of Kiddush. You have to make Kiddush or hear Kiddush from somebody else. When you listen to the brachas on Shofar or whatever it may be, the Alter Rebbe holds you're not allowed to answer Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai, and if you did, you are not fulfilling the obligation of the brachas and so on. Now, when the chazan comes to Kedusha, we learned already you're supposed to stand, and like we learned when we learned about Shemona Esrei, you're supposed to be with your feet together like the angels that have, well, so to speak, like one foot. So then by Kedusha also, you put your feet together, and then you say Nakdishach, according to our text, Kodesh, 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 Hashem Tzva'im, Baruch Kved Hashem Memkayim, Yimlech Hashem Li'elam, and you, when you say Kodesh, 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 you lift up the back of your feet a little bit. Kodesh, Kodesh 3 times. Before Baruch, when you say Baruch, you lift up the back of your feet, the heel. And when you say Yimlech, also our custom is you also pick up the heel of the foot. You don't move away from Kedusha. Now, you keep your feet together until the chazan finishes Baruch Atah Hashem Hakel HaKodesh. Now, you don't separate your feet. This is what's done in halacha. You don't separate your feet until the chazan finishes the bracha about the Kodesh. When he said Baruch Atah Hashem Hakel HaKodesh, then you can separate your feet. When the chazan comes to Meidim, the chazan says Meidim, so if you see in the Siddur, it's what's called Meidim Rabbonim. That Meidim, when the chazan says his Meidim, in the repetition, the community says their Meidim. Now, another mistake people do that halacha says is incorrect. The chazan is supposed to say his Meidim out loud. Not many times, I don't know where they get this from, but this is many times in the old days. Nowadays, what they do is they say Meidim quietly until all the way to the end, because they're saying it quietly. The chazan has to say every word of the Shemona Esrei out loud. People need to hear it. So when the chazan says Meidim Anachnu Loch, the chazan has to say it out loud, even though the community is saying their little Meidim on the side. No, you cannot say the community Meidim when you're davening by yourself. When you're davening by yourself, you have to say the regular Meidim. What's called the small Meidim is only said when there's a repetition of the Shemona Esrei, and the chazan is saying the longer Meidim. So the men, women, they say the shorter Meidim. Here the chazan says Birchas Kohanim Elokeinu V'Elokei Avosenu. In Eretz Yisrael, you should know, in most places, the Kohanim actually go up, and they do like we do on Yom Tov, except they don't sing it. Yivrach, Yivrach Hashem, Hashem Yishmerach, and so on. But the Kohanim in Eretz Yisrael, even in Chabad, the Kohanim in the middle of Shemona Esrei go wash their hands with the Levium, like they do on Yom Tov, and then they do Berachos Kohanim every day. Outside of Eretz Yisrael, it's not done today, and so the chazan says that Elokeinu V'Elokei Avosenu. If you ever notice at Mincha time, the chazan does not repeat. When he makes the repetition, he does not say Birchas Kohanim by Mincha. The only time the chazan does say Elokeinu Birchas Kohanim by Mincha is on a fast day. This coming Tuesday, Shavasei B'Tammuz, he's going to say it then. Why? Because the din is like this. The chazan saying Birchas Kohanim is in place of the Kohanim doing it. The din was, if a Kohen did anything in the Bais Din after drinking 3 ounces of wine, not only is what he did not kosher, but he gets death. Torah says in Pasha Shmini, Hashem said to Aaron, "V'lo yamusu." if they drink wine and they serve in the Bais Hamikdash, they're going to die. Punishment. So therefore, because mincha is already after people are eating, and normal people drink wine during the meals, so therefore the Chazan doesn't say Berachas Kohanim mincha because the assumption is people drink. On a fast day, when nobody's eating or drinking, so nobody can possibly have wine. So therefore, mincha on a fast day, the Chazan does say, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosseinu, he says Berachas Kohanim, just like he would Shachar during the year. Okay, again, we said you need 6 people, you need 9 people answering, and okay, it's a chiyuv to say kedusha with the minyan, answer the amen in the Shemona Esrei. Okay, so all those things that you're supposed to be saying together with the chazan and afterwards also. Okay, now I just want to say another din. What happens if somebody made a mistake? Or they, for whatever reason is, they didn't daven shachris. They didn't daven shachris. And it wasn't intentional. If they did it intentional, there's no makeup for it. A person, whatever, was busy, emergency situation. So the din is, you daven to mincha Shemona Esrei. You forgot. If you didn't daven mincha, you have to daven 2 ma'ariv Shemona Esrei. But that's only the Chachamim allowed a makeup is 2 conditions. Number 1, if you forgot shachris, you could only make it up at the next davening, which is mincha. But if you didn't repeat it a second time by mincha, you can't make it up by ma'ariv. It's too late already. It has to be the next tefillah. If you forgot shachris, you can make it up at mincha. You forgot mincha, you can make it up ma'ariv. Ma'ariv, you can make it up at shachris. But that's only if it was an emergency situation and there's no makeup in any other way if a person did it intention. Okay, so first you daven, the davening that you're supposed to be davening, and then you'll do the makeup one. Okay. Next is another interesting din, what's called the dinim of Tachanun. Now, Tachanun is the confession. We say Shamna Bagadnu and Nafshi Esa. We put down our heads, almost touching the hand, not actually touching the hand. Tachanun is I know people like to get out of saying Tachanun. And by the way, tomorrow Yud Beis Tammuz there's no Tachanun. Yud Gimel Tammuz there's no Tachanun. So Thursday, Friday, and obviously Shabbos there's no Tachanun. Why? Because the previous Rebbe was released from prison. Tachanun happens to be a very, very holy tefillah. In certain respects, it's holier than the Shemona Esrei. So people shouldn't try to get out of saying Tachanun, every excuse. It's very interesting. The Polish Chassidim and Hungarian Chassidim have a custom that if it's the yard site of a tzaddik, they don't say Tachanun. That's their minhag. It's a Torah minhag that they have, that if it's a day of a tzaddik's yard site, they don't say Tachanun. The previous Rebbe said, when they asked him about it, he said there's no better time to say Tachanun than on a yard site of a tzaddik. Because Tachanun, in a certain respect, is even higher than the Shemona Esrei. Because Shemona Esrei, you're standing straight, bittul. But Tachanun, you're actually bowing down. You're falling down, which is even in a certain respect, a greater level of bittul, of subservience than the Shemona Esrei. In fact, there's a whole interesting story in the Gemara. 2 rabbis had a big argument in Torah. I think by them everything was holy, it sounds by us a little bit different. But his wife knew that he was davening against her brother. It was 2 brother-in-law, okay? One brother-in-law was upset with another brother over a Torah issue. And his wife, who was the sister, made sure to get her husband to talk between Shemona Esrei and Tachanun. Because the Gemara says, if somebody talks between Shemona Esrei and Tachanun, his prayers are not answered. So she knew if he davens, her brother's going to suffer from it. So she'd always make an excuse to talk to him. One time, I don't remember if the story that she thought he davened earlier, she didn't realize he was going to say Tachanun, whatever. And when she came into the room, her husband already said Tachanun. She said to him already, you killed my brother. Okay, but again, that's stories in the Gemara which are beyond our understanding. But that's a story in the Gemara showing the importance of Tachanun. The Rebbe, we know, was very much against people just not saying Tachanun. The Rebbe wanted people to say Tachanun is a holy tefillah. Now, what is Tachanun? What's it comprised of? You have the first part is Oshamnu, Oshamnu. Now, if you notice in the Oshamnu, I mean, it's well known, but in case people don't know, the Oshamnu Baganu Gazalnu goes according to the Aleph base. Oshamnu Baganu Gazalnu Dibanu Bepehebi Navish, it goes the whole Aleph base. So it says in halacha and in other svarim that when you say Oshamnu, you should really have in mind any sin that begins with an Aleph. Bagadnu, any sin that begins with a base. Gazalnu begins with a gimel and so on. You notice Al Chet and Yom Kippur, everything is a double Aleph base. All the Al Chet are double Aleph bases in the whole entire Al Chet. So when a Jew says Tachanun or Shamnu, Bagadnu, these are confessionals of sin. So in Chassidus is brought down an interesting question. You have great tzaddikim. They say it about the Arizal. Arizal is a very holy tzaddik. He didn't Shamnu, and he didn't Bagadnu, and he didn't Gazalnu. He didn't steal. So why are tzaddikim of that caliber saying Tachanun, Shamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, if they didn't commit those sins? And Chassidus in the Mefarshim say a very interesting thing. The Arizal, he was he was a leader of the Jewish people. So he was a neshama klali. He was like a nasi, is like the head. Rosh B'nai Yisrael, right? Rebbe stands for Rosh B'nai Yisrael, the head of the Jewish people. So even though the Arizal didn't sin, God forbid to say that, but the fact that there was a Jew somewhere that sinned, when there's a pain in the foot, the head feels it. So the Arizal didn't say Oshamnu Baganu for his personal sin, so to speak. He was the leader of the Jewish people. He was saying it for the sins of Klal Yisrael. Yes, even the non-Jews depend on our tefillah. The non-Jews' existence depends also on the Bais Hamikdash with the sacrifices and so on. Now, this din doesn't apply to women though, but in the morning, men are wearing they're wearing tefillin on the left hand. Okay, so it's disrespectful to use your left hand to fall on. So the men in the morning by Shachris will do their right hand. Really, you're supposed to lean on your left hand. Like by Mincha, we're not wearing tefillin, so you lean on your left hand. But Shachris, because we're wearing tefillin, and we don't want to lean on the tefillin, is disrespectful. So therefore, Shachris, we lean on the right hand. If somebody's a lefty and they're wearing tefillin on the right hand, so in the morning they do it on the left side also. So that's the reason why you see why we don't do it with the hand because of respect for tefillin. Okay. Okay. Now, Tachanun normally, if you're with a minyan or there's an Arad Kodesh in the room, then you fall down. You fall on your hand. Again, the Rebbe didn't actually touch the head to the hand, but you're leaning towards the hand. So when does somebody do that? If they're davening with a minyan, which is also not everybody does. That was a minyan Yerushalayim, and that's generally what Chabad people do. If you're davening with a minyan, even if there's no Sefer Torah in the building, there's a minyan Yerushalayim, a custom Yerushalayim that you do Nefilas Apayim anyway. It's called you falling down. If there's no Sefer Torah, let's say somebody's davening at home, so you sit, prefer to sit for that paragraph, and then you sit, but you don't, fall on your forehead because it's only done when there's a Sefer Torah. Okay, I was trying to get some of the practical dinim. Now, certain days you don't say Tachanun. Like again, you Bais Din, you Gimel Tam, you don't say Tachanun. But there's other occurrences in halacha that you don't say Tachanun. For instance, if let's say there's a bris milah, there's a bris in shul, even if none of the parents or the male or the sandik is there, nobody's there, but there's going to be a bris in the shul, that day you don't say Tachanun in the shachris. No Tachanun in the shachris. By mincha, if it's after the bris, unless if you're davening by the baby, you do say Tachanun. If a father of the baby is in the shul, the sandik, the one that holds the baby, or the moil, you don't say Tachanun. Even though the bris is going to be later, or the bris is going to be even in a different place. If there's a chosin in the shul, the day he's getting married, if he's getting married Monday night, let's say, Monday there's no Tachanun. If he's there. Not shachris, not mincha, if he's there. That's when you go to a wedding, there's no Tachanun, because there's a chosin there. Chosin for 7 days. If it's a first time marriage for either of them, the chosin 7 days. If he's in shul, you don't say Tachanun. The whole minyan doesn't say Tachanun. Why? It's considered a communal simcha. Now, any day you don't say Tachanun, with the exception of Erev Rosh Hashanah and Erev Yom Kippur, and Erev Pesach Sheni. Those are 3 days. We don't want to have enough time to discuss it. Any day you don't say Tachanun, like tomorrow, we don't say Tachanun because it's Bais Din. Today at Mincha, we didn't say Tachanun. Erev Rosh Chodesh, if Rosh Chodesh is Monday night, Monday at Mincha, you don't say Tachanun either. That's it. Friday afternoon at Mincha, we don't say Tachanun because Shabbos. The aura of Shabbos, the aura of Rosh Chodesh, the aura of Yom Tov comes in already in the afternoon after midday. If you're davening mincha after midday out of Rosh Chodesh, but again, that's only if the day itself demands. But otherwise, you do say, also not. Okay, now we'll just last one more then, and then we'll go to Tanya. Why do we say a long Tachanun on Monday and Thursday? We say the Vaad Rabbonim Lubavitch 10 pages. Why Monday and Thursday do we read the longer Tachanun? Because Moshe Rabbeinu, a few times when he went up to Har Sinai for the 40 days, to get the Torah, and afterwards to get the forgiveness. So Moshe Rabbeinu went up and down. It was a Monday and a Thursday. He went up on Thursday and came down on Monday. So because Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai, to the mountain to get forgiveness on a Thursday, and he came down on a Monday, those are auspicious days to get forgiveness. If there are auspicious days to get forgiveness, we add a longer Tachanun. Why? Because it's auspicious time to get forgiven. So we're asking, it's like a slichas. Like you have slichas on a fast day. So you have Monday and Thursday slichas. That's the tefillah of Vaad Rabbonim, those 10 pages or so. Okay, we're going to go now to Tanya.